Good morning, everybody. We have it's 7:31 if we go by Western Union time. So we'll get this meeting to order. We'll do a roll call.
Deacon.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Spicer.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the June 8th, 2023 committee meeting minutes. I have a motion to approve.
You can tell me to move to. Thank you.
All those in favor of approving?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next on the agenda is citizens' opportunity to address committee on stormwater or other public work items. Anybody come here this morning to speak on any issues? Not seeing anybody. New business. Number 1, Public Works Operations Budget Overview. Mr. Morash and Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'll just start off. I'm going to have Brett go through these 4 divisions of operations kind of related to the budget. There was some talk about maybe using the committee just to kind of get familiar with what's going on. We have a lot of new folks. And we would kind of focus on, since the budget really isn't out yet, focus on kind of what the divisions do more and go from there, but tie it to the budget.
Yeah, thank you. As Matt said, this isn't really a presentation about the next year's budget. This is more about the presentation about what the budget does, with our operations division. Just to give you an idea of what the operations division is. It is one of the divisions within Public Works. It's made up of our central maintenance, which does all the maintenance for the city on vehicles. We have our street division, and we have our airport division and the parking division. The airport and parking division are both what we call enterprise funds, where they generate revenue. The other divisions are in general revenue. As opposed to the way it's on the agenda, I've ordered it how you would see it in the budget. Central maintenance would be the first one that would come to as you go through. So we're going to walk through each one of these individually. I also wanted to just put up our logo. You probably have noticed on our shirts for our staff the core logo and what that means. We came up with a few years ago when we had a lot of retirements, a lot of turnover, and we had a lot of younger employees starting to work for us, and realized that maybe we needed to talk more about some of the soft skills in communicating with the public in an appropriate way. So we use CORE as that messaging method, and it stands for improving our community through taking ownership, being results driven, and having empathy for our customers. When we have a situation with an employee who maybe has not gone positively, we kind of use those 4 words to, were you improving the community? Were you taking ownership of a problem? Did you have results in mind and having empathy for the customers? And also we use that to congratulate when we find employees that are doing the same thing. So we found it to be a very effective method to kind of talk through issues. Also with me today, I have the 4 division managers or supervisors with me. Eric Bowers with us, been almost 4 years. He comes to us with a degree in aviation management from CMSU, and really happy to have him. He took the place of Ron Kraft, who had been with us for over 20 years and hasn't missed a beat and made some real improvements even beyond what Ron had done for us, which I'm very appreciative of. We also have Russ Rackers, who's our street manager. Russ has been with the city for over 30 years. He's also a retired Chief Master Sergeant with the Air Force in E9. Very few soldiers make it to that rank in the Air Force, and he was in the reserve unit and did several tours in places most of us wouldn't want to be, as well as doing his service to the city. He was with the wastewater division before us, and after retirement of the previous street manager, transferred over, and we've been very blessed to have him with us there. We also have Wanda Nichols. Wanda's been with us for over 20 years. She's a supervisor for our parking division, has done just an absolutely phenomenal job there. And finally, Sean Stump is with us, who is our supervisor at the Central Maintenance Division. Again, with us for over 20 years at the city. Together, those four bring over 80 years of experience to the city. So we're really blessed to have that kind of quality management in our public works department. So starting with the central maintenance budget, what I try to do is arrange this in the broad categories that you will see in the budget itself. Personnel services, material supply, contract service, utilities, and repair and maintenance. Those are the big categories. But when you start drilling down to seeing what those are, it sometimes can get confusing. So I'm trying to highlight a few points. The overall budget for central maintenance is about $1.2 million. We have 7 full-time employees there. And the same 7 guys have been there for quite a while. I didn't add up the experience down there, but it's a big number. Well over 100 years of experience between them. The cost of all the parts that are used to fix everything from a weed eater to a fire truck come through central maintenance and are paid for out of that budget. But there's also, in those budgets, the enterprise funds pay for those services, both the material costs as well as the labor. And so at the beginning of the budget, in the 10185 accounts, you'll find this chargeback for parts and chargeback for labor. So what that is we pay for the part at CM that goes on a truck, and if it's a wastewater truck, the cost to do that work is then paid back to the general revenue through these chargebacks. So you can see it's a $1.2 million budget, but through chargebacks to the enterprise funds and also the housing authority, we bring in a revenue of a little over $500,000.
List off who is the chargeback.
Chargebacks would go to the airport, parking, wastewater, transit, and then we also, outside the city, we work on housing authority vehicles as well.
Parks and Rec?
Parks and Rec has their own maintenance system.
They're not included in it, although we do maintain their fueling.
Their fueling system is, they use the same fueling system as us, and so we do charge them for fuel. All right? So it's a bit of a, when you get into budget, it's a little bit of an accounting process to find where all the monies are, and that's trying to boil it down a little bit for you there. But in reality, what does central maintenance do? So slides are going to be a little wordy because they do a lot. They work on all city-owned vehicles and equipment, as I said, everything from weed eater up to a fire truck. And all this specialty equipment that the fire department does have, they also work on that. Sometimes they have to send stuff out of the shop, but that's really rare. Usually more when it's a warranty issue than not. They pretty much handle everything in the shop. They are available for call-in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Police and fire is a 24/7 operation. Therefore, CM has to be on occasion as well. Obviously, if a fire truck, they have backups. Sean will make a call whether we need to come in and work on that particular piece of equipment tonight, or if it can wait till in the morning. And that's a call that Sean makes with the department that we're supporting. One thing many people don't realize is they're an integral part of the snow removal operation. The same hours that we're pushing snow, they're at the shop. Pushing snow, things break a lot. They spend a lot of time breaking. In fact, they probably put in more hours than our plow drivers because we don't have a second shift to come and back them up. Enterprise funds, as I said, are charged for all parts and label. They manage and maintain all the city fueling stations. There's 3 locations where the city can get fuel. Ones that are central maintenance, ones at our Hyde Park facility, and our newest one is over at the wastewater treatment plant. They've always had a fueling station over there, but it wasn't tied into our management system. We were able to get that done this year. We're very happy with that. We also use the fueling stations to log the miles or hours on the equipment, so Sean is able to keep up with preventive maintenance.
Having those multiple sites of fueling opportunities is really important. I know it probably doesn't seem like it would be, but if you have a fire truck on the far west end, and we used to have to go to central maintenance,
Right.
get fueled up. That's not the case, and so it keeps us, or keeps them in the territory. And makes things a whole
And
lot better.
and also it's good fuel controls. It's all in the same system. There's no more paper of writing down that I got fuel at this location, et cetera. I think it's a really valuable tool. Again, another thing that they get to maintain, and they're really excited about it, is our vehicle wash station down at Central Maintenance. Right now it is down. The equipment's basically past its useful life, and Jerry is working on a bid for a replacement of it. And then new to this is the vehicle leasing. We have a lot of our inspector type trucks. We went to a leasing program with Enterprise, so that doesn't sound like it would actually take a little bit of work out, but it actually put quite a bit of work on Sean, keeping the track of the paperwork and reporting to the leasing agencies, et cetera. Now it took some work off of our mechanics, but Sean's got big shoulders, so we put it on Sean. We also maintain the transit equipment to FTA standards, Federal Transit Authority standards, and those are very high standards, what they require of us. I believe the last 2 triennial reviews, we've had no issues been found with our maintenance department, and that is a credit to Sean and his guys. They do an absolutely wonderful job, not only maintaining the equipment, but if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. They're able to keep track of all the documentation, which, as you might imagine, FTA is more worried about the documentation than the actual work itself. Then annual budget, annually, police and fire, police, I should say, turn over vehicles every year. And there's a lot of equipment that goes into those cars. So a car comes in and it's got some of the upfit to it, but the majority of it takes place down at our shop or in combination with outside vendors. So 25 to 40%, we're trying to estimate that, of one of our full-time employees is dedicated to that process a year. So it is quite an undertaking. It's not only transferring the cages and the seats and the radios, et cetera, from one vehicle to the other, but then you also have to get the other vehicle ready to sell, because that's a big revenue generator back to the city, is the sale of that vehicle. And this is all done with 7 full-time employees. That's one supervisor being Sean. We have a lead mechanic, Keith Hoslog, 4 great mechanics that bring us a wealth of information, wealth of experience, and then a parts clerk. We have a huge parts room, because you imagine all the equipment that we have. I'm amazed sometimes whenever they come up with a widget that they need to replace, and they walk back to that parts room and the guy comes up with the same widget to put back on that vehicle. But at the same time, knowing what parts to keep back there versus, because when you sell that equipment, now you've got all these parts that you bought that are already good. So there's a lot of work and art to keeping track of all those parts. And finally, in the $1.2 million does not include capital. None of the budgets I'll talk about today include capital because I'm just trying to give you a flavor for what the budgets in general do. Capital expenditures go up and down depending on the year. One thing I failed to mention in the previous slide, in the current budget, we look at that repair and maintenance, $339 of that is that repair parts. That's not enough for us for the year. This past year, they used sales tax to supplement that. In previous years, it had been around $500,000, $500,000 to $600,000. They were able to supplement that with a $200,000 infusion from sales tax. So, in the next year's budget, we just need to make sure that we understand that, the zero budget is not 393. It's 393 plus the 200. That gets us to what we need to maintain our equipment. All right. Moving on to the street and stormwater division. Do I have any other questions on central maintenance before I cover the next one?
I just want to say that one of my son-in-laws is a firefighter in Columbia, and they have a horrible time with maintenance. So you guys must be doing a good job. He said they've got good equipment, but they just don't have guys who can fix it. So I guess hopefully the fire department's happy down here. He said they're constantly having reserve machines up there. He said it's terrible. So you guys are doing a good job down here. One more time that we don't want to be Columbia.
Thank you for those kind words. I won't mention anything about Columbia, but thank you. Moving on to Street and Stormwater Division. In the budget, you'll see it called the Street Division, but we've started likening it to Street and Stormwater because often stormwater gets forgotten. Again, start off the bat, materials and supply. It looks like a big number, and it is. But what that is $225,000 is street materials. That's the concrete, asphalt, et cetera, we use to maintain the streets. It also includes almost $300,000 for snow fighting chemicals. In an average year, we'll use 3,500 tons of salt. Each year, our finance department bids that work out, and we budget based on that 3,500 ton average. There's some years we're going to be a lot more. Last year was fortunate; it was a lot less. But we try to budget to keep those bins full. There's been many a winter where we've seen the back of our bins, and we're really worried whether or not we were going to make it through the next storm. So we want to make sure that it's there. Again, this budget was also supplemented with sales tax money for stormwater materials of $200,000. That doesn't appear in our base budget, but it is integral to the workings that we do. In fact, we sometimes are figuring out how we're going to find the funds we need to finish out the year, depending on what's broken and what issues we've run into. Another big number that you see on the screen there is the utilities. Over almost 600,000 of that goes to Ameren UE that maintains the street lights throughout the city. And I'll get a little bit more detail on that. Street Stormwater Division, what they do, they're really divided into what we call three different sections. The first one is the maintenance and construction section. The supervisors came up with the best way that I've heard to describe the difference between them and the sign, signal, paint, mowing, and sweeping section. The maintenance and construction sections handles everything from the top of the pavement down. The sign, and that's a lot of sign, we call it sign shop generally. That group, they handle everything from the top of the pavement up. If it's grass, if it's a sign, if it's an electrical device, that's them. So, and then the third section is the smallest, which is our right-of-way inspection. Right-of-way inspection over the last few years has really become an issue with the number of people putting fiber in the ground. It used to be we were handling a few driveways a year, some developments, and then obviously water line replacements, gas replacements, etc. But everybody and their brother seems to be putting fiber in the ground now and trying to keep track of these folks and deal with the issues that they've created in individual neighborhoods.
Our biggest complaint.
Is our biggest complaint right now.
Our biggest complaints. I get it every day.
Ours too.
So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, what we've done to try to mitigate that as best we can. So we have 28 full-time employees down at the street department, 28 and a half if you count me. For accounting purposes, my position is funded half through the general revenue in the street department and half through the enterprise fund of the parking division. All our staff are involved in snow fighting. All staff are involved in emergency response, such as flood, whether it be river or flash flood, wind, tornado, ice, hail. Every emergency needs barricades. That's just whatever the name of the emergency, at a minimum, we're bringing barricades. And our total budget is about $3.6 million. Talking about each one of those sections individually and what they do. So our construction and maintenance section, there's a supervisor that oversees those, and he has 4 crews. Those 4 crews have about 16 members total between them, but currently we have 2 vacancies, and then one of those staff members have been reassigned to a right-of-way inspection. So that group is down 3, which is essentially one of those crews. So we're really operating right now with 3 crews as opposed to 4. We are actively recruiting for those 2 vacancies, and so if you know somebody who wants to work the street department, please send them our way. Street repair program. We have over 250 centerline miles of road. which equates to about 700 lane miles. So work examples, you know, on a given day, they might be doing curb repair, replacing a handicap ramp, doing a deep patch on a road, pothole repair. We have one person who's pretty much dedicated to pothole repair year round. And then our concrete street repair program. That is one thing that is really not funded. Until recently, we were able to get a contract with Gaines Construction, and we've had them doing some concrete repairs. But primarily, the concrete repair program has been within this section. And we have one crew that generally is working on either concrete or street repairs every day. It depends on what we're doing in the stormwater area. And then we also do our in-house pavement crack sealing. This is one that we've been talking about possibly bidding this work out. Other communities have had real success. It's a very low cost maintenance that, if done to our pavements, really pays huge dividends. And unfortunately, it seems that we often don't get there as fast as we want to do that crack sealing program just because of availability of people. So we've been looking at potentially doing a contract on that work. It would be a low dollar contract that we would pay through our normal budgeting process, or normal budget. Then they also manage the surface maintenance program that we've talked about, and actually in your packets is the program for this year. Councilman Spencer had asked for a copy, and so we just thought it was appropriate to attach it to your packet today in case anybody else needed it. But to do that, what does that mean to actually manage it? Well, it means that before the contractor ever even gets there, we're out there doing repairs, whether it be the stormwater pipe, replacing the inlet. We also are required to make ADA improvements. So if the curb ramps aren't there on that road, we have to get those curb ramps installed before the paving is done or soon after. Then we oversee the work in the contract itself. Our supervisors are out with them, keeping track of the asphalt tickets, etc., to make sure that we're paying for what we've asked for. And then a big thing is managing the schedule. Before they get there, we need 2 or 3 days in advance, go out and put up signs notifying the public that it's going to happen. And then a day or so before, we put up some no parking signs to get our cars off the road. And then the day that it actually happens, typically we're walking around knocking on doors trying to get that one car that didn't get the message moved. And so it's quite a big effort of our manpower as well. Moving on to stormwater, as I mentioned before, one of the big ties there is our overlay program. Every pipe that we want to inspect before we put a new pavement over the top of it, ensure that that pipe has got the same life that pavement that we're putting on top of it is. So if it's nearing its end of its life, we're going to go ahead and replace it. If it's graded inlet, we're going to try to get that converted into a newer style inlet. That's a lot of work. Currently, our stormwater system is made up of over 160 miles of drainage pipes or channels that we maintain, and over 3,500 inlets and other structures. So, as you know, over the past few years, we were getting quite a bit of stormwater complaints, but we were underfunded in that area. The previous council, dedicated a 3-person crew for us, added it to the street department, and we think we've made a lot of good advancements in that area, and I'll show you some examples of that in just a minute. And then finally, it's the other duties as assigned and assisting other departments. As Russ often hears me say, I call him up and say, by the way, you're low bid again on just the little miscellaneous things that come up. In this room itself, the TVs were hung by the street department. Moved the old stuff out of here was done by the street department. PD had a major water leak in their service to the building, and we're out of water for a while. All the excavation and exploration was done by the street department to get that fixed. And then when we had to move out of the Amtrak trailer, our guys became a mobile home installer and figured out how to set the Amtrak station. So they do become the catch-all. Or actually, operations in general becomes that catch-all. It's not just street department. Parking division gets called into that kind of stuff too. But back on the stormwater, we track where we're doing the stormwater work. This is 1 year's worth. There's 37 sites across the city. Each dot represents a project. Many of these projects is 2 inlets and a crossroad pipe, or it could be a stretch of curb and gutter, or it could be, you know, an inlet collapsed and we had to go out and rebuild that particular inlet, but the crossroad pipe is good. Some of them outlets, we're having problems with an outlet or a concern, or a sinkhole develops in a neighbor's side yard. So that's just an example of where that crew is paying dividends. We always have the stormwater crew working on a stormwater system every day, sometimes 2. Right now with 3 crews, one's working on the street maintenance, one's working on stormwater, and one's floating back and forth between the 2. The longest named section, sign, signal, paint, mowing, sweeping section, again, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, but it's really 2 separate groups. One is sign and signal and paint, and one is mowing and sweeping. So we have 2 crews, obviously 1 for each one of those, and then we also have a signal technician, and they're all supervised by one of our street supervisors. Maintain and repair 10,000 street lights, street and traffic signs, excuse me, that are in the right-of-way. 48 traffic signals and school flashing warnings, beacons, and over 800 city maintained lights, like the ones downtown, or if you see the shoebox lights out by the fairgrounds, those are maintained by the city. They mow and maintain city-owned property, stormwater detention basins or water quality basins, and our right-of-ways adjacent to undeveloped property. A lot of this is out in the Algoa area. We have quite a bit of right-of-way mowing that we do out in the Algoa area, but it is all through town as well. They start at the east end every year and mow to the west, and then go back to the east and start all over. We usually get that crew is also our sweeping crew, but between sweeping and mowing, they usually get 2 mows a season throughout our right-of-ways, and then sweeping is about the same as well, at least 2 sweepings of the streets a year. Provide and place street closures and no parking signs for the various cities' events, and we also have to do cleanup afterwards. When you have a parade, it takes a street sweeper after it's done. We can have all the rules in the world that you're not supposed to throw candy from the parade, but everybody throws candy at a parade. But it's not a parade unless somebody's throwing candy. So, sorry to talk about street sweeping a little bit. Maintain citywide street lighting program with Ameren. I mentioned that before. Ameren provides about 3,600 lights throughout the neighborhoods, and we pay them to maintain those, and that's a cost of about $600,000 a year. Obviously, that's a large number. And then recently, maintenance of our tree maintenance contract is fallen on the street department as well. Previously, our forestry department for Parks and Recreation handled tree trimming in-house. That's switched more to a contract with a local tree service. And so a little additional work that's placed on us now is working with that person to get bids to ensure that, that they have a contract that we just go to the one person, but we say, what's it going to take take this tree down or trim this stretch of road, etc. And they give us a price, and then we have to ensure they do it, and then ensure they get paid. Tree trimming in advance of the overlay. If you're going to take a big truck, we need a 16-foot clearance curb to curb, so we have to go through and trim every tree and make sure that those tree branches are out of the way. We also have hazard trees in the right-of-way. If you have a dead tree in the right-of-way, that's a city-owned tree. And so it's our responsibility to get that taken down. And then this time of year, vegetation's growing. It's causing sight distance problems at the intersection, or it's covering up a sign. So we have to make sure there's a sign clearance. Now, small trimming like that last part there, that's pretty much our in-house guys will take care of that. But I'm not gonna have them take down a hazard tree.
Why did the parks quit doing it?
I'm not sure I can, best person to answer that, but as I understand, their forester retired and they chose not to refill that position.
There's a long history about this, but basically, I don't know if we have finance or maybe Matt is being educated on this recently, but this general fund used to pay parks like, I want to say years ago, it was like $80,000 a year. I think more recently it's like 25, and that wasn't funding their work. It never did, I don't think, even at 80. But anyway, they, for whatever reason, reorganized and took that division out, started doing it through a contract. On one hand, it's more clean. We know exactly what we're paying. It's Cordy has a contract right now, and it'll come up when we talk about the item down below. But that's, I don't know exactly the reason why they had their guys retired.
We're paying 25. We were paying 25,000 out of general fund to parks.
Yes.
I believe that's
What
how.
are we paying now for contract?
We have we're notified of the beginning of the program. We still have that $25,000 in the budget, and we're now using that $25,000 to pay Cordy.
So you don't think it's going to be more than that?
I really don't know, to be honest with you. We just became aware of this. Ray retired from.
And we're a little unclear. I got some calls late last night about this 25,000 of where it is or isn't. So. Anyway, I know we paid the bill on the overlay contract part of it, Britt, I think. And what was it?
It wasn't a huge number. I mean, it was $3,000 or $4,000 for the overlay
Clearing the
budget.
trees up above the trucks.
And then we have a couple of hazard trees that were damaged through the tornado over on Duncan Street that we recently got a bid for. It was another $3,000 or $4,000 to take those trees down.
That $25,000, if assuming that's the number, it will eat up pretty quick though.
And on the drive-in today, I saw Cordy was downtown taking a dead tree downtown. I assume Parks is controlling that. We didn't order it, so I'm assuming Parks did, and I have no idea what that cost is. But I'm assuming that it's going to come out of that $25,000.
Chief Scope. Yeah, I'll just speak to it real quickly. This is something that will be discussed in the presentation of the FY24 budget. So this has been a long-standing concern, I think, between the Parks Department and what was originally adopted as a Tree City USA arrangement, and then the war. So I've talked to Director Spalding about it, and their position, I don't want to speak for them, but it is that this really does cost much more than $25,000, fourfold probably what the actual cost was. And what has caused the change now, and why we're proposing a change for next year, is that with the retirement of Ray as kind of the subject matter expert, who really kind of had the practical knowledge, and then was also able to execute a lot of these operational issues. There's a shift now in terms of we probably are going to need to contract more of this type of work, and so the contract is in place, but the arrangement of how that's managed is still kind of up for discussion, and that's something that we're going to talk about for the future for FY24. And I'm sure that we'll have Parks as part of that conversation here, and I would expect them to give their position, but they maintain that it costs much more than $25,000, and so we're trying to get a beat on exactly how much that costs. The best way to do that in FY24 is to actually have this line item in there where they would still manage it. They would still contact the contractor and coordinate the contractor's work, provide subject matter expertise in the forestry within Parks, but all the bills would go towards this account debited in a line item in the city's budget, not necessarily in the Parks budget. So we're proposing to separate it out so that we can have a really solid accounting for exactly how much dollar for dollar is spent contract-wise on these trees. And there's a lot of different tree issues out there. I know some of you have contacted us about, doing tree trimming in certain areas. There's the issue of kind of this public tree situation. There's the street trees, which impact streets and everything they do. There's also, traditional parks type of arrangement of trees. And then there's trees on private property, which end up being kind of a little even more difficult to manage. So it does become a very complex conversation. We're going to be prepared to take that deep dive for FY24 discussions. But we are kind of in a weird spot right now, and with the retirement of Ray, I think was in April. Is that right? You know, we're transitioning to a different model.
But I guess there is a concern with that because, with the original concept of having a forestry department in parks was that they were adding some components to it of enhancement of keeping tabs on trees and health of trees. And so I see that we eliminated a position, but where does that responsibility of that position originally that we said we needed, where does all that go? And so I don't think, obviously I don't think anybody in here is going to be prepared to answer that, but until we have those discussions.
I agree, and I think that discussion, we probably need to all have the ordinance in front of us and read the language in there, because that's something I did a couple weeks ago, and it was enlightening.
Are we going to be able to uphold our end of that? Right. And so, there's always a cause and effect of, well, we're going to streamline something, but then we do, something else drops. So, okay.
And I apologize, I intended this to be about a 15-minute presentation. I see now that I'm 30 minutes and I'm probably about halfway through. So I want to try to pick up the pace. Obviously, we're going to answer any question you have, but I'm going to try to go a little bit faster, so in respect for your time. Our final section is our right-of-way section. Currently, we are authorized one construction inspector to do that work, but with the amount of workload that is there, we've had to retask. So we've taken one of those guys that was our street worker and retasked him as an additional right-of-way inspector. That's been it's helped a lot in trying to keep track of what's going on and where. We still obviously get the complaints, but now we have somebody who's able to keep track of it and get those people in contact with the appropriate person. They do a lot of stuff as shown here on the screen as well. One of the biggest things in spring, if it ever rains again, is mud complaints out on the road. We find the person who's given us the mud and get them to clean it up. And then obviously working with all the individual property owners whenever you're working in their front yard. Airport division, as I said, a lot of stuff here. This is a smaller, obviously, dollar-wise. It's about a $380,000 budget to the city in total. They do generate revenue. If you look at the budget there, about $180,000 to $200,000 a year is generated through fees. Those fees include our fuel flowage fee, ground leases. No one owns any ground at the airport other than the city, but all the hangars are privately owned. Those owners pay us a lease every year for that. And then there's also excess ground that we have around the airport that we've acquired over the years for safety purposes. And so for part of that, we lease that out for an ag lease every year. They're also, they are an enterprise fund. If they generate excess revenues in a year, in the 23 budget, we actually had a fund balance that we use. It's not trying to manage and keep a savings account at the airport. We try to spend it back whenever we generate excess revenue, which therefore lowers the subsidy. In the current year, the subsidies to the airport's about $91,000. But of that $91,000, $44,000 is charged to the airport for administrative fees, administrative chargebacks. So that's the general revenue charges the airport $44,000 and then gives them $91,000 as a subsidy. So the net cost is closer to around $50,000 to manage that airport.
Depending on what the fund balance is, so that's kind of a fuzzy number every year. Yeah. They wipe it out and stick it back in. So it's going to go up and down. So
this is a larger number than is typical because coming through COVID, we were able to get some operational grants. Actually, we've got another $54,000 operational grant that we'll be bringing forward to the council in the near future. for the current year. So that these numbers, these budget numbers, will be even reduced even further with that grant. But that's generally the way it works. Is it's received as a surplus in the following year. You know, actually maybe even 2 years.
But something on the radar for that division is a new maintenance shed for
The
the truck that.
Yeah, I'll kind of get into that, briefly, but that's, to kind of talk, little statistics about the airport. Most people wouldn't realize we have 83 based aircraft that live at the airport every day. There's almost 40,000 annual flights operations, of which 4,000 of those are from jets. The picture there shows customers that we love. They come in jets, whether they live here or they're visiting here. They come in, they buy fuel. We like them. We like them a lot. They buy lots of fuel. There's flight schools currently maintains about 50 students, learning how to fly. And if you've heard anything about the aviation industry, we need pilots. So our airport is helping to meet that need. There's over 120 full-time jobs at the airport. People that live in this area, 120 of them work directly at the field. And if you look down there in the bottom, in 2012, MoDOT did a study, and the airport supports over 250 jobs with an annual payroll of about $8 million, and our economic impact to the region is about $20 million. One of the things that's really unique about our airport is the public-private partnership we were able to enter into with a local businessman after recovery from the flood. So our airport administration building was reconstructed as brand new. It's a beautiful building. It also houses a great restaurant, which again generates sales tax for the city. So it's a really great addition, and that was all done and now out of the floodplain. It was built, flood resilient, if you will. So that was huge. And now we don't have a building that we maintain. He that business maintains that building, and we essentially rent space for him. But the rent is offset by the ground lease that we gave them to actually lease the ground to build the building. So it's I think a win-win all the way around. Save the city a significant amount of money. What's the airport division do? There's over 50 acres of paved surfaces, including our 2 runways. We mow and maintain 190 acres of field area, what we call inside the fence, and then there's the ag area outside the fence. We ensure all airport operations meet FAA standards. Won't continue to read them all, but those 3 people also do all the snow removal at the airport. So 3 people are doing 50 acres worth of snow removal, and they pretty much live at the airport whenever it snows. So I can't say enough good things about them. And then also aircraft emergencies. Eric is an aviation expert, and if it's in our operational area, he's one of the first contacts from our tower and assists emergency responders in that effort. He does it 24/7. An annual budget about $380,000. This is a map that's MoDOT put together. It's where people fly to or from into Jefferson City. It's kind of amazing whenever you look at that. This actually only represents a small percentage of the flights that actually generate and fly out of Jefferson City, because this is only the ones that filed what's called an IFR flight plan, an incident flight plan. If they are flying visual flight rules, you don't necessarily file a flight plan, and so the FAA doesn't know where they're going to or from. So these are only ones that generally are jets are going to be doing that. So that gives you an idea where those jets are going or coming to us from. The airport is essentially another front door to the city. Right now in the corporate world, whenever a business is coming to look at Jefferson City, they're probably coming in on a corporate jet to come look at our community. And with the new administration building, I think we've got a much better face than we used to have just a few years ago. Finally, the parking division. We've had a lot of talk about the parking division, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But there's almost 90% of our revenues come from rental fees. Very small percentage. The remaining is miscellaneous and or from fines. That is a small percentage of what our revenue generating is. Our rates have not been increased since 2004, and it's my opinion it's long past time that we take a look at those rates. The parking fund currently has a fund balance of about $5 million, and the contractual services line up there that you see that's highlighted, that includes $160,000 that is paid back to the general fund and administration fees. What do they do? Maintain 14 parking lots with over 450 leased customers. We maintain 2 parking garages with 535 leased customers between them. Provide 100 short-term spaces to the downtown. Manage 750 on-street spaces and metered on-street meters. And I wish I had a better number. I think it's actually more than this, but 250 on-street time-limited spaces between the downtown and then the south side over in the Dunklin area. Provide enforcement we not only enforce those things, but we also enforce the housing authority properties, and we go out there by the high school and Lincoln University, the residential permit parking zones, keeping the students out of the neighborhoods so that the residents there can have parking at their house. Mow and all turf areas for city parking lots, parking lot marking and striping. They put up the flags downtown, not the ones on the buildings, that's somebody else is doing it, but we have flags that we put on our light poles at various times throughout the year. We support downtown events. Litter control is huge. First thing every morning, as you might imagine, when bar traffic ends at night, sometimes they don't leave nice things around. So the first thing in the morning is our crews are doing litter control, not only within the garage, but within all our parking lots and anything else they see in our morning routine. The other one is their smoke tubes. I've tried to figure out what the right to, but where you put your cigarette butts there on the street, we maintain those with our parking division. Snow removal on all city parking lots, City Hall campus, everything around the city hall here, including the fire admin area and courts. All this is done with 7 full-time employees, supervisor, 3 maintenance staff, 3 enforcement officers. We currently have 1 vacancy in our enforcement officer, and we have 1 of our maintenance staff that's on military orders down at the border. And that's annual budget without capital is about just under $1 million.
This is maybe a little off topic, but when's the last time we looked at the actual size of a parking space on our road? Because I drive a half-ton pickup, and my truck is way too big for the actual space. And I don't know, is there an industry standard, or is there?
We actually just redid the ones on High Street. David, do you want to speak to that?
There's basically 2 different ways of going about that in terms of parallel parking. A typical space is 25 feet long, and that's the national standard. What we've done in many cases is we have provided 20-foot long spaces, and then every other space there's a 10-foot gap, an X'd out section. And so essentially that's the same amount of space, but it does encourage people to, it allows the cars a little bit more entry and exit space if everyone is parked within the lines. And so those are kind of the standard dimensions, but certainly pickup trucks, especially 4-door pickup trucks, are that length. And so you will be taking up that full 20 feet with a truck for sure.
And it's a little different on High Street. They didn't do the dead area. That was a decision made in the original.
Right, and so generally those spaces, some of them are a little bit tighter just to try to fit them in between the bump outs and various and sundry things. So some of those are down to in the 22-foot range. So some of those are tighter than what we would typically see.
I think people sometimes just freak out when they see that X, and so they won't park there, and it makes it worse. Better than better, but I'm taking up half the X anyway, so I was just wondering.
You got to overhang the X out, because that's kind of your maneuver area.
Sending you the ticket. And
What we actually use as a guide for the officers if they are riding in two spaces, and it is a ticket that gets written, and it's usually not the person that started it; it's the next person who gets it. But we say if your tires are between the lines, you're good. Last slide, just to kind of summarize, each of our budgets and kind of our budget priorities that we have going through. For central maintenance, it's just basically we want to make sure that we have the resources we need to give the support needed to the police, fire, and the rest of public works. We unfortunately can't control what breaks. It's just up to us to figure out how to fix it. The street division, kind of two concerns there. Again, we want to make sure we have the resources we need to maintain the streets and stormwater system to the level that I think all our citizens want. And then the other one is kind of an elephant in the room is our aging fleet. In 2004, 2005, the city made a significant investment in the fleet of the street department, and we still have many of those vehicles still in service, and they are at or past their expected life. So that's a real concern, but we understand that there are budget challenges. For our airport, it's replacing our temporary 1973 control tower. That's really our highest priority. We actually do have some federal funding that has been approved for the airport. Unfortunately, it's not enough. But just yesterday, we received that there's potential for additional funding that Congressman Luke Neubauer has been working on for us in the federal budget. It crossed a major hurdle yesterday for another $3 million, but it's still got a long way to go. And then the other part of that, though, is a building to house what we call the ARF truck, the Airfield Rescue Firefighting Truck, and combining our maintenance department into one building. So we believe we have the funding in line for that, and it's, as soon as we get the control tower funding nailed down, that is our next highest priority to start working on that. And I actually hope to be under design for that building in taxiway extension maybe yet this year, but early next, if not.
And the goal on those, Britt, is that typically the airport can come up with 90 to 95% funding on, through the programs, federal programs for these things. And so we just they have to make their way into our master plan and then logically progress through. And there's a priority order they put them in to build, and probably the tower, obviously, with the federal allotment is number one there.
this might be a question for our esteemed city administrator, but as we know, the governor vetoed half of that funding. Do we have a plan for the other half, or?
So I think it's really important that we distinguish, and there's been some confusion in the media as well, that, what we're just discussed here is the facilities, and facilities that could potentially house a future apparatus. And when we say apparatus, we're talking about rolling stock. We're talking about a large piece of equipment that is the truck. And so the distinguishment is really important between facilities and the apparatus or the vehicle. So,
Without one, we don't need the other.
well, they are certainly related, but there is some more information that Britt alluded to that we're planning on rolling out. I think I discussed it last night with the mayor, and we're going to try to get that information out here really soon and talk about the additional federal funding that looks like it's very promising. So that's for the facility only. The truck itself, because we're not a passenger rated airport, commercial passenger traffic like Columbia is, it's Part 139, I believe, is the way they refer to that in the airport community for the federal funding. We don't get a pass-through grant for the vehicle. Typically, in those Part 139 airports, they actually receive a vehicle from the FAA, an ARF truck. So we're not eligible for that program. So that's why we've had such a struggle in replacing what is now a 33-year-old truck to serve in that purpose. So yes, the governor did cut in the veto half of the funding needed to make that happen. We're looking at our options, trying to talk with some of our state reps, and as well as Senator really, it actually splits the district lines because it's in Callaway, even though it's in Jeff City. So we're talking to both our senator, but also Travis Fitzwater as well. So it's a complex question, and the short answer is we're just not sure yet where we can come up with that other amount of funding to do it right. There are some options in buying potentially a used truck, but that also comes with some challenges as well. So
I think it's important though for that apparatus to be also viewed as a regional resource, not only just isolated to the airport. That with the firefighting capability, it can have a huge impact on a roadway, hazmat, nuclear power plant scenario. So I think that does help broaden the discussion of potential other investors coming to the table.
So we're not ruling anything out, and that's an important point. We look at aircraft crashes. Typically, those are within 10 miles of the airport, which they can be anywhere. I think we've experienced that in this community. They can be in the middle of the neighborhood. So it is a needed piece of equipment. We're still looking at all the options that are out there and how we can get that done.
I'd also say, Britt, maybe talk about the taxiway to the new buildings and stuff. It kind of opens us up for other.
Right, where we have the planned location for this new facility is what it requirements are. It needs to be appropriately sited so it can respond to the airfield, but it also needs to be, if it's going to be also a maintenance building, it needs to be convenient for our maintenance activities as well. So where we've looked at siting it would be an extension of the taxiway on the north side out close to Waymire Road, where you would have maintenance staff coming in off Waymire Road to park there on a daily basis, and fire would actually respond to that location, but then we'd have to have a taxiway extended out to Waymire, or almost Waymire Road. The advantage of that is once we do that extension, we would free up additional locations for future hangars. Those hangars for private development. We are basically full on our hangar locations currently, and we've got at least 2 people that are currently vying for 1.5 spots. And we believe if we have that opened up, those will fill up. Those new spots will fill up very quickly as well. So good hangar development is good for us. Hangar development equals activity at the airport equals fuel sales, which is an economic engine to the whole region.
I assume we're looking at potentially having some kind of living quarters at that facility, possibly in case we have a storm event, snowstorm event.
We have rudimentary living quarters at every one of our facilities. Eric's is a couch, but the guys have currently they've kind of created. Yes, we would be looking at break rooms that could accommodate taking some cat naps, etc. when these long snow events, for sure. And with that, I'm complete if anybody has any questions. And I apologize for the length. I see I'm at the hour mark.
That was a lot of information, Britt. I would encourage maybe that to be supplemented in our budget document. There's a lot of information there, and you only got half the council here. So.
Well, I appreciate the ability to do kind of a deeper dive in what they do, and so every time we move budgets around, or especially Britt highlighted those big numbers, and that's really the bread and butter of materials, and that's tempting to change those numbers. A lot of times, what I'll have to do, and it happens a lot, I don't say it doesn't, but this time of year, I'm always looking at those big categories pretty closely and saying, okay, material money is razor thin right now. We're just really getting into it. Do I come back and try to get a supplemental, keep those crews the most productive they can, or do we have to shift work, or what do we got to do? So that's kind of where we're be doing that in the next month, right here at the end of the year. Just things cost more. We hope to get as much done as possible, and so we're always pushing the crews to do more, but that costs money. So.
And feel free to communicate some of those concerns to this committee as we go along, and then that way it's just not a surprise.
Yeah, it comes about right now is when we start looking at it here.
So there's a lot of good basic information. Appreciate it. I noticed it wasn't in our packet,
Yeah, well, I finished it at 10 o'clock last night. But actually, 7:15 this morning. We have to distribute to the committee and the council as well if you think that's of value.
And we could, put it in electronically through the iPad in some form, so everybody has to click on it and go back.
I think that'd be good. That'd be good.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Monroe Street recommendations. Mr. Bangy.
Yes, thank you very much. We've talked about Monroe Street on a number of different occasions over the last months. Certainly, it was part of the discussion of the last sales tax, and there were funds that were put into that sales tax or named within that sales tax for the improvements to Monroe Street. So currently, and it's not shown on the slides or part of this, but we are working on what we would consider to be phase 1 of the Monroe Street project, which is the piece between Dumpling Street and the highway through the rock cut. And so we are working on that design. We actually are about ready to select a consultant to help us with the wall design there. And so that project is basically still on schedule to be built next year. So, but what we're talking about today is the remaining section, or the one-way section up on Monroe Street, basically from the hospital back in towards town. And so we were asked to present what we as staff thought would be the best option for that section. And so you might recall several months ago we had 3 or 4 different options that we brought forward. Widening the street to the west, widening the street to the east, removing some of the houses on the west and creating parking, et cetera, et cetera. So looking back at all those options and then referring to the South Side study that was done back in 2016 for that area, basically what we as staff would recommend is the option of widening the street to the east. And so what you see on the screen is what that cross-section would look like in sort of a sketch form. Ultimately, a parking lane on the western side of the street, 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction, and then ultimately, because of the grade, there would be retaining walls that would need to be built on the western or the eastern side. What that does is it's going to require the purchase of some properties, certainly on the stretch between Woodlawn, which is the very south part of that map, or the very bottom of the map, left-hand corner upward. There's about 17 properties that we're going to have to purchase at least parts of. 2 of them perhaps would be total purchases. The one that's kind of shown in the light blue color in the middle of the screen would likely be a total purchase. The property at the bottom of the screen on the left, it's kind of a greenish color. That property, depending on what the owner might want, could potentially be saved with the construction of a retaining wall. But again, the damages to that property would be somewhat severe. So that's kind of a overview sketch of what that would look like. If we were to do that, the street ultimately would be 33 feet wide, which is our standard street width for kind of a commercial roadway with parking on one side. And then going along with that would be a certain number of utility relocates. Obviously, there's a large Ameren power line that runs along the eastern side of that road, so that would have to be completely relocated. But we would also be looking at doing pedestrian improvements along that stretch. So with that, I would be, the total cost of that project, we're estimated to be about $2.75 million. And then it would take us some time to put that all together. Obviously, just the road design itself, but then the negotiations with those 17 property owners would certainly take a good deal of time to get that to happen. And ultimately, there could well be the need for condemnation for some of those properties if they weren't willing to sell. So a lot of work that would go into that. I wouldn't suspect that we would be ready to construct this project anytime before 2026. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What is the reason that this project was started in the first time? I mean, who pushed the widening of it? Why was that? Do you all know?
It was added as one of the projects within the sales tax by the council at the time.
And I think the reasoning was, if my memory serves well, is that Lincoln was going to close Chestnut Street. they asked to have it disclosed, that section between, up the top of the hill, can't remember what that is, anyway. I guess it actioned all the way down to Dunklin. The concern was there were no more north-south streets. Just that short, there would be no north-south streets to connect. And Monroe would be one. And so that was the reason they said, well, if we're gonna do that, we're gonna have to widen Monroe because we have the street there. I think it is an absolute waste of money, a waste of time. I don't see it benefiting anyone. If you go over there, if you come off of Stadium, there's a nice wide, beautiful street, parking lots, comes into the Capital Region, comes down to the bottom of the parking lot, comes into their clinics, does everything it needs to do. There's no reason to go past the place where it's one way because they have all their entrances in there. If you come on Madison Street, they have good entrances. I don't see anybody driving that area. There's the only ones that are in there, a few people that live down the apartments down there. If we're gonna spend, you say $275, I say $3 million by the time it's done, we have to fix Madison. We have to fix Jefferson Street, plus disrupting 17 people, taking their properties for, it's only going to benefit, I think it's aesthetically, it'll benefit. It's not going to benefit anything whatsoever for connectivity. People aren't using it that much. I drive all over there just because I want to see what the neighborhoods look like. And that is such an unused street. There's no reason to go there. No reason to come from Stadium, no reason to come from Dunklin because it doesn't go anywhere. When you come up to the one-way part, well, that's Franklin Street. You can get over to the other street. I personally think there's a landowner that has a nice business. Actually, a couple of them down there on Madison would like to see their backyards better, and I think Cap Region was. But $3 million guy, I think there's a cooperative project with the county, and I know one county commissioner is dead set against it too. He said it's a waste of money. And I just think it's a waste of time planning more. If you can convince me this is a necessary street, that we've got traffic coming through there, I can see it. But my gosh, when they go to work at Cap Region, they come in from Stadium, and all the parking lots are there. They don't have would not help them one bit to have it both ways. I just see it's a waste of money. And, a project that really, it'd be nice, but my goodness. Look at West Main Street. Look at Dunklin. My goodness, we're breaking people are complaining all over town. If we go to do that for $3 million, I'm gonna get phone calls all over and say, why don't you fix the streets I drive on? Nobody drives that street. But, that's my opinion.
Mr. Bangy, is there some connection of when this project was first proposed and the link of Lincoln wanting, because I do remember that concept of Lincoln University wanted to cut that
Yes,
section.
I don't know that this one in particular, certainly that was part of discussion and part of a discussion that was going on when we were looking at the project at Dunklin and Clark. So yes, those were conversations that have been going on in the background. I'm not entirely for sure if this one is connected to that.
How this kind of came about was the study David referenced here.
Yeah,
Cap Region was a major contributor to that. Myself, Janice McMillan, we were on a committee there. So they were really interested in how they could improve the community around them, not just for them necessarily. We did throw in now again, David alluded that the council put this in the thing. It wasn't a staff recommendation at the time. And we did put a traffic count in here in David's bottom of his note here. There's about 950 vehicles on the one-way section-ish in the middle, and 1356 we have a traffic count on that two-way section by the hospital. So you can see the influence of the hospital and their parking and everything. And so, that is a pretty high dollar amount to do for that low of traffic, unless there was some reason the council really wanted to improve this beyond what we're doing already at the intersection. That's an $800,000 project up by Dunklin to redo the signal and the retaining walls and everything. We think that's going to be in that $800,000 range. So, also to point out, the dollar amount for this is probably a little more than we might have available when that rolls around. There it is there. Up on the screen. So
Right.
David just put it there, so you probably just go ahead and talk about it instead of me.
Right, so ultimately, you've seen this slide before, but the original sales tax breakout, which is shown there in the first column under original. So there's 500 or 5 million for the High Street Viaduct, 300,000 for or 3 million, I'm sorry, for Stadium Boulevard, $1 million for Monroe Street, and $2 million in economic development. But with some projects that the county has brought to our attention, Wildwood and Militia, there was some reshuffling of that money. And ultimately, back in April, or was it March, the committee sort of indicated that perhaps they would want to go, what we were showing there is kind of example B in terms of how the funding would be broken out, at which point we were putting $3.5 million into Monroe Street, which, if our estimates are right for the two projects that we're proposing, we would be a little bit above that number with what we're estimating.
And to go back to a little bit of the governor's budget, the transload facility was cut as well. So that's something we are fully committed in to, that we're gonna have to find some dollars.
Right. When we put this together, we weren't really aware of that money, and so we put an extra $1 million in that line item. Just at that time, we didn't know about the state money, but of course now the state money is gone again. So
It's the economic development.
right, in the economic development line there. So
County does indicate that they're fully committed to funding that project and not necessarily going to ask the council for more money beyond what they already had. Now that could always change, but that's the latest I've heard.
correct.
Councilman Schwartz.
I guess this is a question for you, but I drive that way to get over to Tanner Bridge from downtown. There's a lot of kids that play down the flat there on past Dunklin, where those apartments are. There's a lot of kids on those streets. I don't think it behooves us to make that 2-lane and increase traffic at all, for one. And I don't, just the pleasure of the chairman, but I'd be happy to vote on a motion that sends the message to the full approval that cease and desist on this project.
So, as shown in your package, this is part of that Old Middle Bridge South Side plan. They had quite a few community input sessions for that plan, which city was involved in, quite a few people in the community. I was involved in it, and this was part of it to enhance this whole area of the city. And so I think that's an important aspect of this. It did have that input and that community support. Properties other than the 2 that are mentioned there, the 15 others, it's my understanding, and I know that area well, on that side, I don't know how much that cost, but it's not, I don't think it's much cost for this part of the project, because the back, and maybe you could speak to that. It's those are the tail end of backs of the yards, and it's mostly overgrown. But anyway, that's
Right, you're correct. There are 15 properties that we would just be touching their backyards, and those particular parts of the yards are very, very steep at the current moment. And so they don't appear to be being used all that much by the property owners themselves, but again, it's still their property, and we have to.
And another thing that we need to keep in mind is all the new sports fields for the high school, which are just beginning to be used, and the need for better traffic mobility in that whole area, I think, is present, and this would certainly help that.
Councilman Deacon.
For one, Councilman Lish, I disagree. I don't think people use that to get to sports fields. They're going to use Adams Street. They're going to use Jackson. They're going to use Stadium. But I was also very much involved with the concept of change that Capital Region had down there, which we alluded to the whole streetscape. And it was a nice project, but this was just a little piece up in the corner. What they really wanted to do is down there along Dunklin Street, along Madison and Monroe and Jefferson. They wanted to do all of that. I would much rather see them start doing that part of it, enhance the look of that and make that agreeable and aesthetically pleasing, rather than spend $3 million on a little piece up here in the corner that was just kind of an afterthought, and only because they wanted to look their backyard look better. For the south side, that's not going to help the south side at all. If they truly want to enhance things, fix Madison. That's the entrance to their emergency room. That's the entrance to their clinics. You get down Madison Street, it gets bumpy. You go over Jefferson Street, which is one of the conduits in town off the highway to go straight uptown. My goodness, a friend of mine got stopped by the police because she was dodging the manholes. They said, "Why are you waving?" She said, "Because of the bumps of the road." No, we got to fix what we have rather than doing my feeling. I mean, I'm just one vote, but let's fix what we have. Let's not get into stuff that really isn't necessary. That's only going to enhance a couple of property owners, and it's definitely not going to enhance the city much at all.
And for full disclosure, so that we're all kind of on the same comfort level, is that at our last public works meeting, we kind of asked staff to get to this point, and thank you all for doing that, because obviously it really enlightened what the cost of that project was going to be, and really kind of focused in on that. 2016 is the study that you referenced. 2018, 2019, the tornado came. You know, there's a lot of things that changed. The school district did buy up a lot of that property, made those ball field enhancements and stuff like that. So I think it has helped complement what the infrastructure is over there in that section as well. $2.7 million for that section is quite a bit when we're already looking at other communities. So first off, you fulfilled the request of this committee, and we're very appreciative of that. I don't know what the comfort level is to move on from today, or if we'll need more discussion on it. So I will.
It appears that there's someone online who would like to comment.
Okay. Thank you. Sir, you're welcome to speak.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Willard Fan. We live on that corner of Woodlawn and Monroe, one of those houses in the shaded area. And there's a couple things I wanted to comment on, not just regarding things that were said in this meeting, but a couple in the past meetings. I do not drive Monroe Street in the one-way area because of, again, it is a narrow street and there are children down there. And it is a concern of mine that it is a dangerous area. And I guess I would recommend, if the city is not going to widen that street, to perhaps put speed bumps or something to slow down the traffic on Monroe Street. As far as retaining a wall in my front yard, I don't think it is an option because the utility lines. So again, if it's any help to the council committee, you would have to figure in the total cost of purchasing our home in this project. Again, all we've asked in the past is for the city to make some decision on this project, whether it be to go ahead with it or just vote it down. So again, we could move on, and again, right now we would have to disclose the fact that the city is considering demolishing our home. We just want this off the table, or one way or the other. That's all we ask.
Thank you for your comments, and I know this committee sympathizes with your situation. So we don't want you to be in limbo any longer than you have to be. Obviously, you know, $3 million of tax dollars. That's a pretty significant investment. We're just trying to be good stewards and making sure those dollars get stretched and go as far as they possibly can. So that's probably a lot of the reason why we're probably a little slow on this, and our apologies for you for that, so. Thank you again for your comments this morning. Councilman Lester, do you have any?
I guess my only comment that I think, considering, recommendation to the full council that we have this up at our next meeting and have opportunity for other people to have input. Because I know, others involved in the Southside plan, I thought this was a very important, component, and they should have an opportunity to speak.
I don't disagree with that, and I think, then I would follow, agree with Councilman Schwartz that this committee have input on that so that the council has an understanding of where this committee feels, so. I would entertain a motion to vote on, to give an up or down.
All right, I'll make a motion that the second phase of Monroe be put on hold. Is that good enough, or just the second phase of Monroe be ceased?
On hold is more limbo, so.
That puts the landowners back. So I'll make a motion that the second phase of Monroe Street be discontinued.
And the operation is essentially a recommendation of this body to that, communicated to the council.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, we'll do a roll call vote on this one.
Okay. Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
No.
Spicer. Schwartz. Spencer.
Just so I'm clear, probably what we should do is have a resolution indicating what happened here to the full council. We can give the same presentation if you'd like at the meeting, let other stakeholders know what's going on, that may be available in that region, et cetera. And they can come and voice their concern, and then the full council could either ratify that resolution. Brian, I'm looking at you, is that an adequate way? I think it sends a clear message then to everybody, including the staff, to hey, let's move on to the next thing.
Thank you. And again, thanks staff for bringing that information to us today. You're up again. Number 3, MoDOT TAP grants.
Yes, so we found out this on Monday, the 10th, that that MoDOT was doing another call for projects for TAP grant funding, and so TAP grants are Transportation Alternative Program grants. And so those are grants that pay for projects or help support projects that are non-motorized, so whether they be pedestrian, bicycle, or other non-motorized uses. And so in the past, we've typically used those funds to build greenway trails, although we have gotten those funds to do other such things. Sidewalks is another example. We redid Water Street down by the train station with part of these funds as well, since that's kind of a multimodal project. So what we're proposing, the timeline is relatively short on this, and so as I said, the notice came out on Monday, and the proposals are due on the 24th of next month. And so, in order to have time to create those applications, we wanted to bring this to you now, although we don't have a specific list of projects, but just a kind of a menu here that we were going to be working on and see how they fit within the funding and the criteria. So, the first one that you see on the screen is the kind of the Boggs Creek Trail, which we have actually applied for in the past. It scored very well. In fact, we had been told that had it been scored higher within our own Campo region, that it would have been funded. And so we would certainly like to resubmit this project for this round. A second project is again something that we had submitted last time, and this goes. It's basically the pedestrian portions of improvements to the intersection of Stadium Boulevard and Satinwood. And so we had discussed the need for improvements to that intersection, particularly in terms of flooding, and then also the intersection is somewhat skewed, and so it doesn't operate very well in that regard. And so this project would build a new box culvert to handle the water, probably raise the road just a little bit to address some of the intersection flooding issues, and then also would extend our Greenway Trail system from where it kind of ends or turns there at Cap Region Medical or JCMG, and bring it up into the neighborhoods at that point. So again, that project was one that we've submitted on before and would like to submit again. Kind of extending out from that same area, you can see the project that we were just talking about here at the intersection. We're also looking at extending the Greenway Trail from that point to the south and tie into the subdivision, Colonial Hills subdivision, actually tie into Bunker Hill Road as another project, and then extending that same Greenway system up through property that's owned by Capital Regional Medical Center and bring it up to Southwest Boulevard. We have a lot of certainly those connections are nice. We have a lot of concerns that have been brought to us about cross-country track teams from the high schools running on the road, and particularly in these areas. And so perhaps being able to provide some additional off-street access for them would be good. But just certainly, I think it enhances our Greenway system in that we're connecting into neighborhoods and allowing additional people to reach the Greenway without having to first get into their car. So those would be submitted as separate projects. The pink line and the light blue line would be potential separate projects as well. Another one would be the Bolivar Street. And I'm sorry, this is kind of hard to see, but right now the Wares Creek Greenway comes in here at the bottom of the picture near the Duncan Street Bridge that we built. And when we did build that project, we extended the Greenway Trail up to the intersection with Missouri Boulevard. Subsequently, the redevelopment St. Mary's has built a Greenway Trail up along the edge of the old parking garage. And so what we're talking about is then connecting that Greenway Trail up and across. Probably wouldn't look at building a separate structure right now in the hopes that one day the Bolivar Street Bridge would get rebuilt with a tri-level redo. And of course then 3-Story Coffee actually built part of the Greenway Trail system in front of their property and ultimately carry that project up to West Main Street. So that is another project that we're looking at. And then another is kind of completing the Greenway Trail system that was envisioned some 20 years ago when we redid South Country Club Drive. But in the meantime, Turtle Creek subdivision has been built, and they constructed a Greenway Trail along the frontage of that new subdivision. And so this would pick up from where that ends and come up the hill and basically tie into our Greenway Trail system that exists here by Fire Station 5. And so again, it's a way of connecting more residential properties, residential areas into our Greenway Trail system. So hopefully it would be able to allow people to use that more easily. And so that's those are the projects that we're looking at submitting on. But again, those once we dig into those a little bit more deeply and looking at some of the funding and match dollars that we have available, and then certainly just the time that it takes to fill in those applications, that list might ultimately change a little. But the applications do require an action from the City Council, and so it's a resolution in support. And so if we move forward with these, we will be bringing that back to the council for their meeting on the 21st of August in preparation for the submission of them on the 24th of August.
We submitted an application for a TAP project for stadium and Wood, yeah. Is there status on?
We have so that project wasn't funded in the last grant cycle, but we're going to be submitting it again. But in the meantime, we've tried to enhance our position with that. We have done survey in this area already, and so we did that over the last month or so. We have had, just for your information, had some conversations with some of the folks that live there, particularly the fellow here on the corner, whose property is most severely affected by that project. And so there is discussion in the community about that project going forward because of the fact that we have our surveyors out there surveying. So.
I'm sorry,
Stadium.
Yeah, that's that area.
The corner of that guy, it's on that corner house too.
Yeah, John.
That's him. He's worried about his driveway, not being able to get his cars out.
Right. So ultimately, I've had further discussions with him and have explained that, you know, if this project were to move forward, you know, the city would be needing to acquire his property. There isn't a way for that house to remain. If this is the layout of the roundabout, ultimately, we're going to have to purchase his house. And so he's aware of that now.
And again, to kind of put it in perspective of what our discussion was on Monroe.
Correct. Yeah. So again, if we go back to the, you know, kind of how we had allotted the dollars, we did in what was example B at the time, you know, put in $2.5 million for the Stadium Boulevard project, and that this is the project that we were talking about funding with that money. And then, you know, if we were to get the grant, then $500,000 of that would be grant funds.
When would that be possibly resubmitted?
So the grants for this they're due on the 24th of August, and we've been told by November the 1st we would know whether or not we've received the grant. So right now the TAP grants, the cycle had gotten messed up, and so this is kind of a short cycle between the last application, but it will be another 2 years before the next call for project comes out. So if we're not successful this time, you know, it would be 2 years before we could apply again, and by that point we may well, the desire may be to move forward with that project without that grant.
So we can't, so just to make sure that we're all understanding, this stadium in Satinwood, that one's not part of this current application process?
It is.
Okay,
It is.
just want to make sure.
Right, yeah.
Great.
We've applied before, and we're going to apply again.
Awesome. Okay, great.
And there's a lot more money in this, and you put 136, I think it's a typo, right?
Well, no, that's the additional funds. Evidently, the dollar amount that I was thinking was an addition was wrong.
Okay.
That's correct. So but still, this is probably a good opportunity. The last time there was a call for TAP projects, the original call, there weren't enough projects to soak up the money that was available, and so they actually had to do a supplemental call to try to get more projects in the mix. So, you know, if that holds true, then, you know, perhaps this is a very good opportunity for us to move forward with some of these. So,
Thank you for the information. Any questions on that? Okay. Other old business?
So we're looking for, if you
Oh,
endorse
you
these,
want-
we'll bring a resolution, because they require a resolution
I'm sorry.
that the council will support these if they fund them.
Can I see the motion to?
I'll move, so move.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's second?
Jack.
Okay, thank you. Deacon?
Aye.
Lester?
Aye.
Spicer?
Aye.
Schwartz? Spencer?
Aye. Thank you. Tree trimming at the end of Lafayette Street. Councilman Lester's.
So this is, I had a resident ask about Lafayette. They couldn't view the river anymore because of all the growth. And so I said I'd look into it. I know other people that like to go down there and see the river, sometimes have their lunch down there. So we got through Parks the quote from Corte, it'd be about $3,000 to clear out the vegetation, and around $500 a year after that to maintain it. We then went to Environmental Quality Commission. We discussed it, and the sentiment there was that perhaps instead of clearing the whole area of the trees, they could do a little less and leave some spots where you could view the river, but would be taking out so many of the trees. Maintain the bank better. So instead of the $3,000, those $3,000 might be a few $100 less than that actually to do the job. So anyway, one before Public Works to discuss. I'll just say I've lived in 4 river cities, and Jefferson City certainly has the most magnificent river of any of those 4. But as a city from those 4, we do the least to provide opportunity to residents and visitors to enjoy the river view or walk along the river. I know in Tulsa, where I lived last, there's 8 miles along the river. It's not nearly as much a river as in Missouri. A greenway from downtown Tulsa to Jinx, Oklahoma, from 11th Street to 91st Street, and it is enjoyed and very well used. We have just not, in my opinion, leveraged our opportunity of having the Missouri there. So I think this would be a good first step. Councilman Healers has a much bigger vision. I think he's correct. In the future, we ought to do much more and have places like at City Rock where places people can walk along the river. You have to build out some decking or walkway. But anyway, wanted to bring it for discussion.
You would like an action taken on this body, so are you proposing any?
If I may, I agree. I would like to see it cleared off too, but I am somewhat in disagreement with the environmental quality because trees have an independent growth. If you cut them out 25 foot, they're going to grow back in together. So you're going to be constantly cutting branches off, cutting trees down. If you're going to have an upright tree, it's going to grow until you can't get any more sunlight until it gets the next tree. And so you cut that one out, well, those two are going to grow together. So you're going to have to take them all out. Either that or get something. The bank's going to hold itself. Vegetation takes over everything. That's the one thing that's the most successful thing there is on this planet, vegetation. So you cut the trees down. I think those are all volunteers anyway. They weren't there originally. You'll have something to hold that bank in there. If they're going to cut them out, maybe leave one way over there, but even then that's going to occlude you. Unless you have a tree that has like you have out here in front with a really tight growing system, those branches are going to touch each other, so it's going to go back and clean them out again.
Either way, there'll be as I understand, twice a yearly clearing out to maintain whatever use is done. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they'll grow into each other. You're going to have to cut them all up because if you only got about a 50, 60 foot place there, I think the maintenance are going to have to climb up and cut the branches out. I've dealt with trees all my life, and yeah, they're going to keep growing into each other. You're going to have at least 50, 60 foot apart.
Staff have any comment?
Well, I kept getting emails about it, and I said, well, Mike, normally we at Public Works, we're interested in our maintenance of looking at signs and clearances for various things. This is kind of wrapped up in that whole tree discussion with parks, so it's kind of out of my wheelhouse a little bit. But I said, we can certainly talk about it here. It's not a lot of money, granted, $3,500 I think it was. But I'm not sure where the budget is, and it sounds like the other Matt has a better handle on it than I do, then maybe.
But just for the committee's benefit, I tried to get something up on the screen quick. We apologize for not having a visual, but the area we're talking about, this is the end of that cul-de-sac. You can see unfortunately, this is Google Maps, and so it's doing a lot of weird things.
Yeah, it's by the federal courthouse. There are areas to view the river. Have the new bridge in the Capitol grounds. Of course, you can go to the other side of the river. It's just, I don't know how well utilized. Maybe it is well utilized. I know the federal courthouse folks are a little touchy about people parking in various too close, but we did create a little bump out parking area there on the bulb, so a few people go down there.
I do have a quick question. So there's some kind of structure from the old prison.
Yeah, it's a guard tower there.
The old guard tower. Is there any thoughts of utilizing that for any kind of viewing tower and
in our
hands on to be incorporated into this project? So
right, I mean there is a line on a piece of paper that would indicate that the Greenway Trail system would come along, so starting kind of in the lower right-hand corner, and coming up, and then somehow working its way up that slope and tie into the end of Lafayette Street, and perhaps incorporate that guard tower at that point in time. So again, that's it's part of our active transportation plan document, and so you know, that could be some number of years away, but there is kind of a plan in the background for something.
Pretty unique structure. I mean, right there. I mean, it's pretty cool. So.
It is. It's a very and if a person were to be in it, you would see very nice out on the river.
But
It's very
just remembering back, the federal courthouse folks are very concerned about who was going to go on this tower and somebody being able to get in it. So they're always very security-minded folks.
Councilman Lester, you want to propose your motion?
Yes,
I just wanted to make sure that staff, I mean, I don't want there to be any kind of misunderstanding of what our intent is if there is some discussion of, you know, taking out all the trees, or, you know, I just.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes,
I
sir.
might on that, maybe it'd be helpful to read the quote just so that we can kind of be all on the same page. The quote that we have to do this work, it says, tree removal at the far north end of Lafayette Street north of the cul-de-sac. Remove the tree and brush about 100 feet wide down the hill to the chain link fence, then fell the trees below the fence / wall down to about 5 feet down the slope to the railroad, leave that material there, and then treat the stumps with Tortal. So then a little bit additional on the weed control brush and weed killer application on the brush and broadleaf plants below the cul-de-sac at the north end of Lafayette Street down the slope. As far as the spring reach, staying at the edge of the railroad slope. This will be done a few months after the tree work in the following year. So I think my only concern would be, you know, we just need very clear direction from the full council and some sort of official action that gives us the direction of what needs to be done, and then also the funding source that's identified to go with that, because it's not a one-time thing. It's going to apparently be potentially you need that to be very clear of who's doing what and then where that funding's going to come from.
And so as neither an engineer nor a forester, but you know, as someone with risk mitigation, kind of at the forefront of what I'm supposed to do, I do have some concerns because of the slope here, and you know, while $33,000 to clear out trees is not much money in the grand scheme of things, I'm really worried about slope stabilization because if that slope, you know, if you take out a bunch of trees, you destabilize the slope, how's that impact that cul-de-sac? And then also, how's that impact, you know, the potential for material coming onto the railroad tracks? I think it's a great idea to, you know, clear view sheds for the railroad. The city is too separated from the river from a personal standpoint, but this particular approach, I really think it needs some more study on you know, what the impact. So once you do this, what's that do to that slope and the stabilization of the infrastructure that uses that slope? I could be optimist. Like I said, I am not an engineer nor a forester. Farthest thing from the things that I do, but as had the opportunity to scramble up that hill at various times working on the NMSP, it's very steep, and so I would like a little bit more thought about, okay, we clear out all these trees, you know, the roots that hold the soil in place. What's that do to the stabilization of the slope and the infrastructure that supports? If I am wrong,
Yeah, and we built that slope with our Lafayette cul-de-sac, so it's a fill slope already that was stabilized, and it's just volunteer trees into that slope, so it's at an angle and everything. It shouldn't. Now there are other slopes around. This isn't a good idea. We've had to repair them. I think Water Street comes to mind. There's one over off Boonville that's kind of has some issues, but it's a lot different scenario. We stopped short of this one and sloped it appropriately, and so probably the stabilization. I mean, you know, anything can happen, but by and large, this is the pretty stable area. It's steep, but it's rock.
And it's rubble fill too from demolition of some of the buildings.
And the ground growing vegetation is gonna take over right away. I mean, there's never gonna be a naked spot as long as there's a little bit of soil and a little bit of moisture. And something's gonna take it over. And that's what this stuff did. Also, that's probably, you know, it's usually cedar and locust first comes in.
I guess my perspective would be, I mean, is that something we want to look at doing Missouri native grasses or something, I mean, you know.
That's what the Environmental Quality Commission recommended.
As again, I think we do need to heed our interim city administrator's concerns about this is gonna be an ongoing expense, so.
The ongoing expenses, I understand, is $500 for twice a year maintenance.
Is that something that even staff could look at doing in-house or not? Of the maintenance once, if the trees have been eliminated?
You know, this kind of goes back to my presentation of the, you know, your low bid again. You know, obviously when we're doing this, we're not doing something else. You know, could it be done? Obviously, you know, we have staff that maintain it once it's done. I do have concerns if they're just cutting the trees and falling them in place, we can't then get back in there to maintain it.
Right,
So,
and that is, was that clarified in the bid? Because that is leaving them in place. So that does kind of.
Makes it a little more difficult.
It's down and dirty.
so, you know, what would need to be done, if we were going to do this and you wanted to maintain it, it would be, Matt and I have not discussed this, so Matt, if I'm off base, just tell me. We need to mulch that. They could leave the mulch, you know, spray it back onto the slope or whatever, but those, what they cut would need to be mulched up or hauled off or something. It's all volunteer stuff that came up from the fill slope. Actually, I remember we had a lot of tornado debris in it, and I remember being out there looking at it, and they were, you know, yay big around. And we had our staff walking through, picking up tornado debris down on that fill slope. But, you know, they grow, they get bigger, and that's what's happened. We could clear a swath, but if we were going to do it, I would prefer that we do it, mulch up what's there, not just fall it. And then we can get back in and maintain it.
Based on that recommendation, then I think we would have to have that rebid for better understanding for that. Okay.
Yeah, or at least maybe the better way to approach that is have a two-part option. You know, you have the base bid here, but then to do the additional work with the alternate.
Councilman Lester, is that okay if we go that approach?
Sure. And yeah, and I know, you know, I think getting another bid option to mulch and spread on.
We don't want to create a long-term burden for, and
If it's worth doing, we want to find out if it's worth doing.
If it's worth doing, we can make a plan to make it happen.
We'll make it work.
I think the sentiment is from this committee that we would like to see that, you know, opened up and access and view.
If that's the direction, if you can give the staff the opportunity, I can get out there with my folks and say, what's the best way to do this? Where we can add it to, like I said, we have that mowing crew. Maybe they're brush hogging it a couple of times a year to keep the brush. To Councilman Deacon's point that they are going to try to grow back. You know, if that's the direction, let us make a plan that's a long-term plan, and we can come back to you.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's our property, quite frankly.
Yeah, it is right on the bounds of state property, so that is an issue.
I think there's some hurdles we need to clear first before. Okay. So we'll just table this for the time being. Okay. That's your pleasure.
Yes, table, but get another quote and look into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seemed like people are in favor of doing it as a group. Okay, we can make that work.
Moving on to item 6, reports. First grant updates. Cincy, you're not the last.
I know. I don't mind whenever. So every month, come before the Public Works and Planning Committee to kind of present an overview of updates that we've had in grant funding within neighborhood services. Within your packet I've highlighted, you can also access some of the links that are within that report. The first project that we'll talk about kind of segues from the last conversation is in regards to Missouri State Penitentiary, our Economic Development Administration Disaster Recovery Grant. It's a $1.5 million grant that we've been working on. This one is, to be honest, a little bit threatened just because of the MSP redevelopment project and the hotelier being released as master developer. So we've had to make adjustments EDA has been wonderful to work with in trying to shift some of the original application requirements to see if we can still proceed with this project. So one of the things that with the original grant, we were given infrastructure dollars in exchange for job creation. So the hotel was providing 67 full-time jobs in exchange for us getting the $1.5 million for infrastructure. Since the hotel is no longer at the point of development, the EDA has been working, we've been working with the state of Missouri on the One Health Lab to see, and the primary care associations to see what job creation that their development could potentially have. The state has returned that there will be 24 jobs created by the development of the One Health Lab. They have signed off on the beneficiary form to EDA. We have submitted that to EDA to see if that will be acceptable to go ahead and proceed with our project. In addition, we are also still on that final phase of our environmental review process. We've been working with EDA, the state, DNR, and the SHPO to get a programmatic agreement executed. We're at the point where actually the consultation, we're at the point where we need to bring in consulting parties. So we need to reach out to the tribes. The Miami tribe expressed interest in participation, as well as Cole County. The Miami tribe has to respond by today in order to participate in consulting on the draft. So we'll wait and see if they come in. Essentially what that means is we need to get all of our environmental reviews buttoned up, and then we have the opportunity to get our notice to proceed, and we can actually start the real work. There will be a 30-day public comment period for the programmatic agreement, as well as a public meeting. The Historic Preservation Commission has expressed interest in hosting that meeting. Right now it's tentatively for the next August meeting. If we cannot get that draft done, then it will be the September meeting, but we'll make sure to keep council apprised of when that meeting would be. So right now that puts our timeline for construction potentially starting in fall of 2023. And we have until January 26th to complete the overall project. Moving on through our CDBG funds, this is our entitlement allotment. We are currently in our 5th year, so we have to update our analysis of impediments to fair housing choice plan. As part of that, so we have RKG, who's the same consultant that did our housing study, is helping us with that project. We are also, the 2023 annual action plan recently closed its public comment period. We did not receive any comments regarding that plan, and that just basically outlines how we are going to spend 23 grant dollars in calendar year 2024. So there will be a resolution request at the July 17th council meeting to go ahead and adopt that action plan so we can submit it to HUD. We are also simultaneously working on our consolidated plan. That's the larger 5-year plan that the annual action plans feed into. We are expecting to open up a public comment period next month, and that plan is due in November. And that will dictate how we spend the next 5 years of CDBG funds in the community. A big one, and I sent out an email to all of council just to let you know that this was happening. The CDBG Disaster Recovery Fund, this is the HUD assistance we received after the aftermath of the tornado for $7.3 million. The multifamily program is currently open. This is a program that developers could come in and apply for CDBG DR funds. And if they receive those funds, they can layer it on with MHDC's low-income housing tax credits. I did attach the proposal form in detail to the end of your packet, so that way you can see kind of the rules in the matrix and how it gets scored along with that. We will be requesting that a scoring committee comes together to select who gets the letter of intent from the city of Jefferson. So if that's something that you're interested, please reach out. We can get that committee organized for that selection process. Paul Bruin Revitalization Grant. We have 2 projects that are currently still in their environmental and design review phase, including 206 to 210 and 300 East High Street. I'm a little concerned with the 206 and 210 East High Street. It's the old JCPenney building. It's got a lot of structural issues on the back side of it. We are currently working with the property owners essentially say, you've got to do some structural repair first before we can go ahead and proceed with the risk of sub-granting federal dollars because of the amount of investment that's going to need to structurally secure that building. Our historic preservation fund grants, we have design guidelines. We did have our H3 Studios consultant come in and present to the Historic Preservation Committee meeting this past Tuesday. The purpose is to kind of create a development guide, design guidelines within older areas of the city. We talked a lot about infill and the possibilities there, and just breaking down, more aligning our local processes with state and federal. That way people have access to tax credits and other financial sources to be able to maintain their structures. Our consultant for the West Main Phase 2 architectural survey is Stantec, and they will be presenting at the August 8th Historic Preservation Commission meeting. They will be surveying the Lower Jefferson subdivision off of West Main. The EMS, state CDBG-CV, the Cole County EMS station. Once again, it's the city applied on behalf of the county in order for them to be able to access $2 million to build an EMS station downtown. It went through the environmental, and we've had our pre-construction meetings to kick off the project. The authority to use grant funds has been issued, and the plans have been submitted for review. So it's right there, and they've also selected a contractor. State CDBG-CV for transformational housing. They're at also the end phase of their environmental assessment. It's currently being reviewed by DED. We have sent an MOA back to the SHPO for signature, and that's the last. Once we get that MOA executed, public comment, authority to use grant funds, and we can start activity. And one of the things that I hope that gets picked up on these reports, that this is a very long game we play. It's phased step by step, but if we keep that cycle going, it works. Community Revitalization Grant Program. We applied for MSP demo and rehab of historic structures. We received $2.1 million. We are currently participating in administrative kickoff meetings. Because this funding is ARPA, we do not have to jump through near as many hoops as we do with the regular federal funding in regard to the environmental assessments. But we do, because it's also on MSP, we do have to wait for that EDA grant to get cleared. We also have the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District grant. We recently received $25,000 to repair and paint the 3 glass recycling bins. We did have to provide an $8,334 match, but we're using that all out of our already existing glass recycling budget. Leverage that to get the 25. Also, the local tourism asset development grant is an administrative kickoff. They're kind of being handled at the same level, and this one was for hospitality development at MSP. Our pending application that we've got to work on is our Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. We're getting a formula grant through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law for $76,770 to produce an energy efficiency and conservation strategy plan. And once that plan is in place, having that plan will open up access to other implementation dollars. So we are working on that. And with that, I always put in upcoming opportunities. The Missouri Municipal League always publishes upcoming opportunities as well, just trying to match funding with needed projects. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
For the strategy plan for energy efficiency, is that going to be in-house, or are you going to use a consultant? Or?
We'll probably use that $76,000 to hire the consultant to help. It just, that would be, to do it in-house would take up a lot of time, and it would be helpful for somebody else to do the legwork while we provide the data.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
sales tax report, Mr. Bain.
Yes, the report is in the packet. I just might point out just two things with the agreement that the city signed with the county. There was $400,000 that went to the transload facility, and then 1.5 million that went to the Wildwood project. Those are the significant changes since last time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Has all sales tax G money been committed?
There might be a few tens of thousands in an account or two that we'd still need to spend, but yes, generally speaking.
Gone or committed.
Gone or committed, yes.
Item C, quarterly building permit and business license report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this new report we were asked to put together for also quarterly meetings. So what we've provided here is a couple different things. One is a broad overview of the permit work we've done over the last 12 months. We've also attached a report from the finance department. They're the ones that handle the business licensing component of that. They had a report that they do already. So this is over the last quarter for new business license applications. So I'll just point out a couple things in our report for building permits. The first three columns there really, I think, kind of tell the story of housing within the community. I think that's part of the kind of current conversations we're having with priorities as far as growth and development within the community. So I think it's a good thing to be aware of and highlight. So as you can see, we've had a little bit of single-family development, very little two-family and multifamily development. And that's really the first three columns. So that's new construction. And then I probably jump to the last two columns. So really, there's a balance there between new construction, but we also are doing some demolitions. So we've highlighted some of the demolitions we've done during that same time frame. The very last column kind of combines all those new residential units because multifamily can be 3 or more units. So that captures the actual number of new residential units that we have in the community. So if you wanted to do a net increase, you could take the demolitions and the new residential units there and come up with your number. So unfortunately, we do have probably more demolitions than we'd like to see. It is an ongoing issue that we're addressing with the community. So this is kind of a new report. So if there's anything that the committee would like to see going forward, we've kind of had some internal discussions about what that kind of story we're trying to tell with our permits, and we'll continue to kind of have those conversations. But anything you'd like to see going forward, conversations you'd like to have with this, we'd be happy to hear about it.
Well, and I appreciate staff's response on this because this was kind of dropped in your lap by me.
Absolutely.
So, for full disclosure, but I would like to try to capture that as far as a trend, some statistical data that we can go back periodically and say, hey, we're moving in this direction, whether it be single family, multifamily, and not always have to rely on studies that we continuously have to pay for and those kinds of things. So again, I appreciate you getting this developed and put it in our packet. So.
And I think we've had some conversations about how to present it and capture. I think what you're saying is that kind of benchmarking over time, so we can kind of have that snapshot of where we've been and what our trends are. This is a good kind of kind of a quick kind of grouping of permits, but I think we can probably do something that's going forward.
And as far as it relates to the business licensures, I just think we have no idea of businesses that want to come into this community and open up and those kinds of things. I think it's something we ought to be knowledgeable about and celebrate at the same time. I mean, I think with this new administration, we're really trying to convey that we're open for business, and we want to see that. We want to see how that strategy and that philosophy is impacting the business community. So, thank you for doing it.
I just wanted to echo that, and I appreciate the reporting. I would be curious. I know it's not a whole lot of residential units that we've done approved the permitting. I don't see much construction. Do we have any insight on what things might be slowing up construction on some of these residential units?
Not off the top of my head. If you had a couple in mind, we could look at it and see where things are. This is, the report is permits issued, so it may not necessarily reflect when construction was completed. So that's kind of the metrics we have within the system that we can pull together pretty easily. But just because we issue a permit one day, could be constructed in 6 months, it might be a year, so there's sometimes a little bit of lag. But yeah, let me know if you got something specific, we can take a look and see if there's some hurdles there that's causing delay.
And since we are entering our budget season and process, you know, we've tried to commit some dollars for the future for demolitions. You know, you might want to have that on your all's radar that, you know, I know that's a situation that's not gone away, and we'll probably need to look at, you know, enhancing that budget line item for the near future. So I think the sentiment of this body is we're still committed to making sure that we remove those dangerous buildings as soon as we can get that.
And I'll just echo what Ms. Lindsay here had in her presentation about the low-income housing tax credit. I think that's an important component to the story of growth in residential units in town. So we'll be obviously very much interested in kind of how that progresses.
And I'm pleased to report, you know, Mayor Fitzwater, along with our JC rep partner, established a group of folks to come and have a discussion. We had that Monday. It was a very good discussion about LIHTC, and we had representatives from the MHTC present. They were able to answer questions, and we had a very good discussion with that issue. So, again, thank you. All right, 2023 service maintenance list, Mr. Smith.
Just provided for your information, all those contracts have, well, actually, yes, they're all three have been approved. In fact, the ceiling contractor finished up yesterday, I believe, in town, so that work is actually complete. You know, there is often questions about our ceiling. When you overlaid that street last year, why are you back there again this year? Again, the ceiling contract it is a integral part of the overlay, but it's done a year later. It helps preserve the life of that pavement. So if you do get residents concerned that we're double dipping in a neighborhood, you know, I liken it to sealing your deck. You know, you build a deck, you got to let that wood cure a little bit before you put your sealer on it, and that's exactly what we're doing.
It's up in the preventative maintenance part of that we kind of probably didn't do a good job at.
Related to that real quick, I've been getting quite a few calls on North and South Capistrano. I know that's the concrete part of our maintenance program. Do you have an idea of when they're going to get back in that neighborhood?
I wish I still had Russ here to answer that question for sure, but you know, right now we're just finishing up our work on getting ready for the overlay, and then they'll transition back into concrete repair. I believe we talked about fall this year, but let me verify that with Russ and send you an email.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, my concern is that there's an exorbitant, and I'm not using that word loosely, an exorbitant number of stormwater inlets that have trees growing out of them, they're included, grass growing in them, and it's been going on for over a year. I've got probably 35 pictures in here that just only took me about 20 minutes just on the east end the other day of 2-year-old elm trees growing out of the stormwater. Those things are included, the water can't get at them. They really should be taken care of. It's been an ongoing concern. And I really don't understand why we quit spraying the streets for the vegetation. Asphalt meets the curb, the gutter, that line in there, almost every street in town has grass growing in it. And also where the gutter meets the curb, there's grass growing in there. Those type of plants, a woody plant isn't so bad. It is a straight taproot. It exerts pressure out on stuff. But this, the grasses, those herbaceous type, they have an adventitious root system. It goes way underneath that asphalt. It's like a spider web. It keeps on growing. That little grass here, it picks up water and it spreads it all the way underneath our asphalt. The data is so old, they don't even research it anymore, the effects of vegetation on our asphalt. They don't even research it, it's so bad. actually Houston, Texas has a program where they encourage the landowners to spray the weeds because it is so detrimental to the pavement. And I've noticed that for the last, I guess it just hasn't been a culture of caring for the last 7 or 8 years. We don't spray anymore, and I cannot see a reason why we don't.
Councilman Deacon, to be honest with you, I've been doing my job for 20 years, and we've never had done that in our maintenance program.
Maybe you haven't, but that's a horrible thing to say. I mean, that is probably the worst thing you could ever do to your blacktop. I just picked up National Asphalt Association. That's the number one thing they're talking about. You've got to keep your weeds out. And all the data is now the type of chemicals, not the adverse effects. I mean, that's far gone. The chemicals you use is where all the research is now. And it's unsightly. It presents a town that is absolutely run down, non-maintained. No one cares. It just, I mean, you can't have weeds. Or even down on Grant Street, brand new blacktop, old gutter, weeds growing in every one of those cracks of the gutter. Within 2 years, there's going to be water infiltrate underneath that substrate, broken down again. If we're not spraying, then I would suggest we go back, read the data, and say, maybe we should be spraying. No other reason. Present a nice looking town. Now, I do notice it's sprayed around here and also around the Central Bank down there. That's got the most beautiful asphalt all the way around. Weeds are always taken care of. And Jefferson Street from the highway all the way up to High Street, it's beautiful pavement, nicest in town. Never understood why, but maybe I'm wrong. But I just think that it's a horrible, horrible lack of maintenance, not taking care of the weeds in our streets, and the stormwater. That can't be excused. The stormwater inlets should not be included. And you look at the line coming down the street. That entire line along the asphalt before you get to the gutter has got 6-10 inches grass. The water's going to hit that and come back in the street. It can't even get to the inlet. And when it does get to the inlet, you've got 2-year-old elm trees growing there and a mass of leaves and stuff. I mean, the water just keeps on going. It's not you. It's not your staff. It just was not. It has not been a priority, and I just think that definitely should be a priority for no other reason for how the town presents itself. And the data is irrefutable. You've got to control the weeds, and we don't. Why don't we seal our cracks in the pavements anymore? It's been so long since I've seen someone out there sealing the cracks. That was the reason I ran for council. I didn't want to do this. But for the last 6 or 7 years, I saw our streets just go to heck. And I think his last administration, it wasn't a priority, and so no one cared, and we just did other things, and it's a mess. It's a mess. Every major street we have has got major work on it. And every major street has got, almost everyone, has a stormwater inlet full of leaves, full of grass, full of trees, and weeds growing everywhere. Maybe I'm completely off in left field and too much of a particular person way what looks, but in my mind, it's not a good thing what's happened with the streets right now with weed control and the stormwater inlets. I'll show you the pictures. I mean, that's not me. I've got them right here, and some of them were just taken 2 days ago. Some of them were taken a year ago, and the same ones haven't been taken. I go before and after.
There are particular instances, yeah, we'd like to know, and
Well, he'll just drive the streets. Matt, come here. Just drive the streets. Go on the east end and just start looking. Just look.
I have received some emails, especially referencing Grant Street, of vegetation growing up right out of the newly asphalted street, right up against the existing curb systems.
I was going to put it on, but I didn't want to embarrass you with all these photos. I mean, I can give it to the IT guy and let the public see them, but I just want to keep it right here. But
if you have specific streets,
I shouldn't have to give specific streets. They should drive them and see them. I'm not going to take. I purposely left out the addresses so you guys would. Oh, I'll go and fix this one. No, I want them to go to the streets and look at all of them. I mean, even on the
sound more of a operational type issue as well. Do you guys? I mean,
as I said, we don't have a program that does that. We do clean. When we find out issues in storm inlets, we certainly will respond to those. but typically, that maintenance is left to the property owner. If this council would like for us to do it, we certainly can do it. We would probably require some budget for some training. First off, you have to be a certified sprayer, which I don't have anyone that is certified in the street department. So I have to get somebody that's certified to apply the chemicals, and then we have to buy the chemicals.
So there are some professional standards that, requirements that staff, if we did that, would have to.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
I
very
think
much so.
We would be shifting to that type work from some other type of work.
Absolutely.
Just so everybody's aware. I mean, we can do whatever. It's
My
just,
next question is though about with spraying, that product does eventually seep into the stormwater. So I don't know what EPA and
That's
That's
the
the
reason for the certification for our, the applier. It has to be the appropriate material, has to be done at the appropriate time. I'm not certified, so I don't know exactly everything that's included in it. But it is we had an employee that was certified before, but they've moved on, unfortunately. So we would have to look at getting somebody else certified.
This is not the homeowner's responsibility. This is street. This is not curb. This is gutter, and it is street.
and driveway cutout. I mean, driveway cutout from the street entering your property, I can see where that is the property owner's responsibility. But I think,
None of my photos have anything to do with driveways. It strictly has to do with gutters, and it has to do with stormwater inlets. Some of these inlets, I didn't even know there was an inlet to scrape the wall that is an inlet. I mean, it's 2-year-old elm trees should not be growing out of there. 5 foot of stuff. I'm done.
yeah, I mean, and we can certainly shift to focus more on that, but the code does require everybody to maintain out through the curb and gutter as a property owner.
on the whole frontage of their property.
Yeah.
Yes,
You have to maintain the gutter
yes.
and that line between the pavements.
Something about a good and sufficient curb and gutter is how it's worded. But that being said, certainly, we try to work with that interface a lot.
And I think that's just
We see a
information that's
2 inch,
not
2 foot
communicated to the
3,
public.
It seems like if the gutter is occluded with vegetation, water can't free fall to the inlet. So why have inlets in if the water can't get there? I mean, really, because some of these lines, there's no way the water will ever touch the curb. And it won't get into the gutter up against the curb. It's gonna stay in the street until gravity takes it wherever it takes it. Because it can't, because with the occlusion, the entire line of the gutter where it meets the street, I think that's counterintuitive not to spray it, because there we have a stormwater problem.
For clarification though, if a stormwater inlet is in front of your own property, is that part of the maintenance for the property owner as
We
well?
would like to maintain that, and we do try to clean them out on a periodic basis. There, as Britt noted, there's thousands of them everywhere. But that being said,
I
typically.
have one in front of my property, so I just wanted,
Yeah.
I want one that practices what code is required.
Well, typically,
so-
we would, if somebody, they would call us to notify us instead of us sending somebody to just dry it. We would try to respond to cases, but we could be more proactive as well.
I don't think that you're driving, they would see it, just look, you see, yeah, there's a bunch of junk in there, I better clean it out. Next storm, water can't get in there. Last storm we had, whenever it was in the fall, I mean, you could see it bouncing over, not even going in there, going on down to the guy's driveway. But I didn't know that was the homeowner's responsibility, the entire gutter up to the seam included where the asphalt and gutter meet.
Well, certainly if it's my property, I'm trying to keep my property looking good. Other people have different ideas maybe about that, and we have, weed inspectors, particularly that's in Clint's group, but.
No, I meant right in the street, right where the gutter.
Well, if it's a
That seam
weed
with that.
over 12 inches, it's probably connected to that, so. But not to say people do leave those alone and don't mess with them, so.
That is so detrimental
It's
to
a
our pavement.
community cost that we'll need to look at.
So there's not a sealant from the asphalt to the curbing that is run down when we put new asphalt?
No.
So there's no cost joint there or?
That's
On a concrete, I'm sorry, no. Used to in Concrete Street we would, but we don't now seal joints in concrete streets either, to new standards. And asphalt has never been done, except for when we do a crack fill. And to Councilman Deacon's point, as I said in my presentation, crack fill is one of the cheapest alternatives, and we've been looking, from a manpower standpoint, we just don't seem to ever get an opportunity to get there with the other demands that we have. So that's really we've been thinking about contracting that work out.
So, but my question is that, you know, when we're doing the new maintenance of blacktop overlay, why aren't we part of that as being part of that?
That joint is there's a tack applied to the curb face, and so the asphalt itself adheres to it. But over time, it does open up, and that's the time when you would crack fill it. You got to give it time to fill. Otherwise, there's nothing to seal because it is a solid joint. When it's paved new, you can't. There is no joint. I mean, but as asphalt ages, it shrinks a little, and that's where that cracks comes in.
My concern is that's where the water. That's why pavement's failing, because the water's getting in through that vegetation. Because the water doesn't sit right on that plant. It'll hit there, and it hits. Well, there's got to be a breach to the substrate because or else it wouldn't be growing. But like I said, that root system is way out there. I mean, way out there. And so that's a perfect way for water to get in there, and then that's where things start to fail. So I would think if maybe we got to put it in the budget and rethink who's responsible. But we need, in my mind, we really need to keep the weeds out of the streets, out of the gutter. Now the curb and the sidewalk, that's a different thing, but it is so unsightly and is so detrimental to the pavement itself. You can see that's why it's cracked so far out there. So, no, why did it crack? Was it bad subsurface? No, it's because there's infiltrate. Water broke the seal.
I think staff's heard. So, any other questions, comments on street service maintenance? When you submitted that information in a previous packet, was the concrete streets part of that?
Yep.
Okay. Could that be emailed to me? Because that's information I'd like to forward on.
The concrete street repair project or the concrete streets that we're doing in-house?
The concrete streets repair projects that we sub out. That are on.
We can put together a report on that.
Is that contract finished? But
No.
If you look back at the report that I submitted about the projects that we were doing, I believe that near the bottom of the first page, we did talk about the money that has been expended on that, which I think is in the $350,000 range at this point. I believe that contract total value is something just shy of $500,000 or right at $500,000.
second page.
Yeah.
It's about 600,000.
We can get a list though, for sure.
We can get a list of what we've done and what on deck. And we've talked to the contractor, or I talked to that contractor, and they probably won't be back in to finish up until the fall. They have other contract work that they've committed to, so we'll see them again this fall.
Yeah, if you could forward that, what we're subbing out for the contract and what we're doing in-house, that would be great. I'd like to have that information. Thank you so much. All right. Item E, transit operations update. Mr. Stegman, thank you.
Okay, to give you kind of a quick history or rundown of what's going on this year. Just due to a driver shortage, we were a couple drivers short back in since last summer. We were managing through, but then we got into the late January, early February period that we had 2 drivers leave us abruptly to different jobs. And we had 1 driver go out on extended medical leave. The decision was made at that time to do the alternating routes. So instead of having 6 routes, we did all 6 routes, but they were alternating every other time. So instead of every 40 minutes, it went to every 80 minutes. Shortly after that, we were able to hire another driver. We got them partially trained on several of the routes. Our person on medical leave came back, and on April 10th, we went back. We put the Missouri Boulevard and the Capitol Mall routes back to full service. Missouri Boulevard, it feeds the whole system basically because everything ties into it with the transfers. Capitol Mall's out on the west end of town by itself, and it ties into Missouri Boulevard. So
And that's back on the 40-minute.
those two routes are back on the 40-minute headings. The other 4 routes are still alternating. Now we have hired one more driver since. He started there at the late part of May. We're working on training. He can do several routes. He's not fully trained the same. Even our one we hired in February is only trained on certain routes. But we've got there. We do have one of our drivers back in May was in the bus got hit. He's been on light duty ever since. I think we're getting close to getting him back into service. We're just waiting on some final doctor reports and different things there that hopefully we can get him off of medical leave. In the meantime, ridership on the fixed routes, of course, the same time back in February when we instituted the alternating routes, was also the same day that the new fare increase took effect. So we had that, and then with all the changes to the fixed routes, our handy wheels has increased quite a bit. So we've been running quite a bit there. So any kind of extra personnel we've had, we've kind of committed to handy wheels. We're doing the best we can with that. We went back January and stuff. We were doing a little over 200 rides a day. We're averaging now about 227 rides a day. You know, when you got one bus, it's only able to take so many people at a time, you know, around town. That's really adding 2 buses to your list of the amount of people that you got.
And add mileage and wear and tear on those.
Yes, and the other issue is on the handy wheel side, our cutaway buses are very aged due to several MoDOT and FTA issues back in starting in 2018. Then the pandemic put a big crisis on production of vehicles, so it is near impossible to get a replacement for any of our handy wheel buses. So it's getting very expensive to keep those running. We have one that CM is bandaging up all the time, but it's probably here in the next 6 months. Hopefully we can make it that long before it's going to be completely out of service. That'll put us down to 9 handy wheel buses, which usually with those and the amount of miles we drive, you almost have one in service almost all the time. So we need at least 8 buses running every day, preferably to get up to 9. But the buses aren't available to get. We've got grant money for it. The prices have gone way up. The sales tax money might be stretched in order to, because that's usually what we use for the matching money for the grants for purchase of buses. So,
Jerry, to tie in with that, because I think that's going to have to be something we put on the radar here really quickly, especially this budget cycle possibly. As you talked about the delay of getting those buses, you know, I think it was last year we did approve that grant for what I call the hybrid buses.
yes, those would be for the fixed routes.
Fixed routes, but again, those are on a delay.
Those buses are still in the works, still going.
Seems like a delay because it takes so long.
It takes 18
But
months.
what I'm getting at though is that are we good on cost, or is that increase impacting that too, to where we're going to have to increase our match portion or not? Or
There was amendment to it to add some changes to it. The base price of the buses stayed the same, but there was a couple corrections. There was thing with the hybrid. The original bid did not have a fire suppression system, which is now required, so it added a little more cost. We changed the transmission type because of the transmission was in the original contract. The transmission we switched to is an Allison transmission, which is what Central Maintenance is very familiar with. Almost all the big vehicles in town have Allison transmission. Plus, this also, being a hybrid bus and partially battery operated, has a geofencing capability to where we can limit areas. We can go on a computer and set areas to where that bus will run strictly on electricity. You know, run off the battery power, like going down High Street. You know, so you won't have the noise of the engine. or the exhaust fumes and stuff there coming out of there. So we've got things there that we can run. You know, we can set up for most of our routes run anywhere from 10 to 14 miles, but we'd be able to run about 5 miles strictly on battery. So, you know, that's a cost saving plus just the environmental impact and the noise and stuff around town. We just have to pick the areas and different things. And, you know, you get around the hospitals and stuff, where you can keep the noise down and stuff there. But also back to the handy wheels, we've been trying to work on different types of vehicles, because right now we're looking at a minimum of 15 months to get another cutaway bus like what we currently use. We've got a list, we're on the MoDOT's list. They've got chassis trying to work out stuff. And then we also talked a couple of years ago about trying to diversify the types of fleet, that we are trying to get a couple of high top vans that hold less passengers, which allows us a couple different options, makes it more maneuverable. We get in around the city, little fuel savings, also the fact that we can get drivers with a Class E license, you know, and stuff there. And then, but those, a couple of them, hopefully next 3 to 4 to 5 months, maybe we can get 2 of those. That's what we're slated for. There's some hoops with going, because everything goes through MoDOT and with the federal grants. And they have just approved the deal. They had a couple issues that wouldn't pass inspection. They've got those fixed, but now it's getting new contracts because of the price increase of everything. You know, so they, you know, we're gonna get them. They're gonna be pricier than what we had when we originally started. They were about $60,000 a bus. Now they're up to almost $80,000 a bus.
And that's what we gotta be prepared for during this next budget process.
Yes. And then we've got there just because, you know, 20% match, it's another $4,000 for what we got to come up with out of our sales tax money. We're also, we've got an old minivan that we use, and it's kind of a service vehicle that we can use, but we're looking at replacing that, which is trying to get it. No place makes a minivan that meets the Buy America standards. So we're trying to work with the FTA to get around to Buy America standards and everything else, so we can get a minivan which would hold 2 wheelchairs, 4 passengers, stuff that we would have a little more flexibility with our fleet.
Yeah, on the budget wise, so what we typically have on the budget side of that you mentioned is, so the operations is where we really focus, and that's, it does have a big operational subsidy from FTA about, we have to match it 50%, but these vehicle ones are matched with the sales tax allotment. So we have accumulated that money. We're trying to spend it, but we can't get the thing, so we keep accumulating. So if that price inches up 4,000, we may have to whack it off something else we were trying to do with that money to, just go ahead and keep replacing it the best we can. As slow as they've been, we've accumulated that money, so it is available. It's just can't get them.
And the reason why I wanted Mr. Segman and Matt to broach this topic is that there's a lot of misinformation out there with our community that it's a council directive that we're not funding the routes. Sorry that our reporter stepped out. And that's a little frustrating to some of us that are getting some of those comments, and that's not the case. It's multiple issues: lack of drivers, staffing, obviously the approval or the acquiring of the equipment, buses, vans, what have you. So
this just isn't a Jefferson City problem; it's a national problem. So I point that out to folks too. I mean, we talk to our counterparts, Jerry especially. Every city around us that has these kind of things.
Yeah, the smaller vehicles.
We're doing pretty good considering some of them.
Because there's, just like St. Louis, we have ours. We've got our handy wheel buses. The lowest one, we have 2 of them. We got in 2017. They've got 130,000 miles on them. We've got one that's up to 280,000, getting ready to go 300,000. We put about 25,000 miles a year on each one of those handy wheel buses on the average. And compared to St. Louis, and talking with them, that they have, we've got the 450s, they got a lot of 550 buses, a little bit bigger, a little sturdier, but they have quite a few of them that are over 500,000 miles. You know, they're Kansas City, Springfield, everybody's in the same situation. You just can't get buses.
Well, again, thank you, again, at the request of me to give some of that information to us. Appreciate you doing that. I know it was a long meeting, but a lot of information, and appreciate everybody's patience and commitment to it. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.